Welcome to While You're Reading, the podcast that unpacks the hype behind everything from book talk obsessions to Booker Prize winners. Hi, Ellie.
Hello, Ellen.
How are you?
I'm very good. I'm enjoying the sunshine.
Me too. We finally have a bit of sun consistently in Ireland here, beyond just like one day here and there. But how fitting that we're talking about sun, because we're talking about something yellow today. What are we talking about?
We're talking about Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I'm holding the book up. It is bright, bright yellow. This is a very yellow cover.
You have the hardback, I have the paperback, but they're pretty much the same cover. So, take us through. What is Yellowface about?
So I'm going to read the blurb. When failed writer June Hayward witnesses her rival Athena Liu die in a freak accident, she sees her opportunity and takes it. So what if it means stealing Athena's final manuscript? So what if it means borrowing her identity? And so what if the first lie is only the beginning? Finally, June has the fame she always deserved, but someone is about to expose her. What happens next is entirely everyone else's fault. Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Very EastEnders, very dramatic.
It is. This was a reread for both of us. When did the book initially come out?
It came out in hardback in 2023, and then it came out in paperback the following year in 2024. So it's been around for quite a while.
Yeah. I think I initially read it maybe 2023, and I remember liking it when I read it. It's very, I think it's billed as kind of literary fiction, but it feels very kind of genre thrillery, kind of satire thrillery. It's quite action-packed. It doesn't have the same kind of interior character focus that a lot of literary fiction has. And I found it very easy to read, quite like compulsively read it.
Yeah, I'd agree very much. I pre-ordered this book because I've heard about it years before it actually was released in 2023, because they announced it in October 2021. So it's been quite a long time since they even started sharing information about it. And the plot obviously is about a writer, and it's set in the world of publishing. And as a writer and a publisher...
It's very up your lane.
Very up my lane. I was very into this right from the beginning, and very intrigued how an author could be writing about cultural misappropriation, which is a large part of the book, from within the publishing industry. I really, really enjoyed the reading experience of it. It's kind of a hint there. I like the reading experience of it, not the whole book, which we'll definitely be discussing today.
I was surprised how much I kind of didn't enjoy it as much the second time around, for some reasons which, as you said, we will get into. But this is by Rebecca F. Kuang, or R.F. Kuang. I had previously read Babel by R.F. Kuang, or actually I can't remember if I read it after. It's kind of a blur, but I really enjoyed Babel. I know that she has written some kind of historical fantasy, kind of, I guess, sci-fi elements in previous. Yeah, the Poppy War trilogy, and then Babel is also like historical fantasy. But this is a very much like, it's set in the modern day, and it's a satire, it's a social critique. It's a turn away from the kind of the genres that she's worked in before.
Yeah, very much. It was a surprise, I think, to everybody when they announced that she was writing it, not only for the topic, but also this wasn't her genre. And obviously any author can go into any genre. It was exciting to hear, not a bad thing at all. But it was a surprise, and it just after the success of Babel in October 2021. So Yellowface was published by Borough Press, which is the literary imprint of HarperCollins. There's different imprints which kind of publish slightly different books so that different teams, different specialties can work on different topics and different genres, so to say. Yellowface was classed as a literary thriller, and it's very kind of interesting they put it in the literary space rather than the commercial space, in my opinion. But the other thing as well, it's not really a thriller. I think a thriller needs to be very, very pacey. There needs to be this kind of really strong payoff. There needs to be a lot of hooks and mystery and suspense. And in this case, there was a lot of kind of funny moments, and it was very satirical in places. There was a lot of commentary on the publishing industry, and there was a slight thriller element in the sense of there's this kind of subplot throughout the book.
June, the main character, June Hayward, thinks that she sees Athena's kind of ghost or doppelganger around the place, and that's kind of the through line of mystery, and she's paranoid already about being found out that she has stolen Athena's work, so it's kind of a reflection of her paranoia. But yeah, I definitely agree. It's kind of a tonal whiplash between the comedy, and then it will veer kind of into the thriller, and then back to the comedy, and you don't really know. It doesn't really fully commit to either genre. I think it kind of like straddles the line, and for me that took away from the reading experience because, you know, when she is kind of going into these delusions and you're like, well, is this, are we supposed to be taking this seriously? Are we supposed to be laughing at her? I don't really know how to feel. So the book was published in 2023, and it feels like a very current book, or like, at least reading it, you can definitely tell it was written in the 2020s. There's a lot of cultural references to the internet, to social media, to memes. I have a quote here from when June is kind of curating her social media presence. She says, I study the Twitter feeds of Athena and her mutuals to see which community figures I should follow, which conversations I should be a part of. I retweet hot takes about bubble tea, MSG, BTS, and some drama series called The Untamed. I learn it's important to be anti-PRC, that's the People's Republic of China, but pro-China. I'm not terribly sure how it's different. I learn what little pinks and tankies are and make sure I don't inadvertently retweet support for either. I decry what's happening in Xinjiang. I stand with Hong Kong. I start gaining dozens more followers a day once I started vocalizing on these matters. And when I notice that many of my followers are people of color and have things like hashtag BLM and hashtag Free Palestine in their bios, I know I'm on the right track. I feel like there are some references there that if I gave this to my dad, he'd be like, I have no idea what's going on here. It's very current and isn't to the satire of June Hayward / Juniper Song curating this social media persona, this author persona, which, in the age of social media is very relevant, but even the things that she's talking about of BTS and The Untamed and hashtag BLM, it really situates it in a time and place, which I find really interesting. I think the first time I read it, I found it quite funny, but then the second time I was even after only a couple years, I was wow, things have aged a little bit. BTS, they've been doing their army service. They're not popping out their songs like they used to.
I'm surprised so many of the references get through because there's references to kind of Rupi Kaur's poetry, and that's a big thing on TikTok, and it was previously on YouTube as well, and a load of other things as well. But it's interesting because not many publishers would usually allow authors to do that for fear that it would age things. It's you certainly find pop cultural references in every kind of contemporary commercial, some literary books as well, but it does immediately age things. But again, I wonder if that is on purpose to kind of show what it's like now or then, so that we can look back and hopefully see improvement, maybe.
Yeah, there was one thing that made me laugh when I read it and reread it, which was when at the beginning of the novel, when Athena is dying, she's choking on a pancake, and
ridiculous thing.
It is ridiculous. I think it's purposefully just ridiculous. June is kind of watching her die essentially, and she has a moment where she's like, "Should I do the Heimlich?" And then she's like, "Well, maybe I should Google Heimlich tutorial on YouTube first to figure out how to do it. Oh, maybe I shouldn't do the Heimlich." And it's just that little split second thing. I was like, that's actually kind of hilarious.
Yeah. That is probably what I would do as well. I'd see my friends, I love my friends dearly, but I'd be like, I don't know how to do the Heimlich. It's fairly simple, but I'd still Google it just to make sure I'm getting it right.
Yeah, I was like, sorry, hold on 2 seconds.
Yeah, just keep reading for just a few more minutes.
Yeah.
We'll try.
The tension / thriller of the novel is that June steals her now deceased friend Athena's manuscript, which is about Chinese laborers during World War II. It's a historical fiction novel, and she steals the manuscript and attempts to pass it off as her own. And in doing so, she kind of crafts an author persona of herself that is vaguely Asian. She changes her name from June Hayward and starts going by her full birth name Juniper, but then changes her last name to Song. The book, R.F. Kuang kind of describes how no one really talks about their kind of ethnically ambiguous cosplay, but she also purposefully takes an author photo that makes her look quite tanned, as opposed to her just pasty white skin. And she talks about the kind of publisher's complicity in it and says, they suggest I publish under the name Juniper Song instead of June Hayward. Nobody talks about the difference in how Song might be perceived versus Hayward. No one says explicitly that Song might be mistaken for a Chinese name, when really it's the middle name my mother came up with during her hippie phase in the 80s, and I was very nearly named Juniper Serenity Hayward.
Interesting. So Song was her middle name, and that's how they came up with it. It's terrible. I've seen this happen in action, actually, from working in the publishing industry. And I have actually heard apocryphal stories as well, where people have kind of said, oh, we used Yellowface as an example to get things stopped, because it still does happen. So I don't say I'm complicit in it, but I think, to be honest, it is very difficult to be the only voice in the room kind of correcting things. And it is so easily done when it's a case of, oh, well, this is selling better in this genre if it's translated fiction. Can we make the author sound more like whatever it may be, whatever ethnicity that's going for, be it Japanese translated fiction or Italian or French or any kind of ethnicity at all. So it does happen. Unfortunately, I have been in rooms where it does happen. I can understand why it's referenced in the book. And again, this is why I find the book so surprising, because it's calling out the publishing industry. But that's a good thing as well. I am glad this book was published, because I think it is needed and it is very timely. And the fact that R.F. Kuang is doing it, probably from her own experience, I can't absolutely guarantee that, but probably from her own experience, it's quite, pat on the back for her, but also kind of important, and we need more of these books.
I think there's a narrative nowadays, not just in publishing, but kind of in general, that like it's better than ever to be a woman or gay or trans or black or brown or Asian or whatever. People are like, oh, diversity is in right now. Like that's what's selling. And though, yes, representation has gotten better, I think it kind of mispaints being a minority of like any kind as like being... Now it's like, oh, now you have this kind of privilege. Like now you have a leg up, which is not the case at all. It's not a leg up. It's kind of just like slightly climbing the ladder to try to get some equality. It's like, you know what I mean? And I think there's a kind of narrative now by some maybe disgruntled white authors or men or whoever, they're saying like, oh, like my book's not getting published because they're going for like diversity or whatever. And I think the narrator of this book really falls into that and kind of perpetuates this self kind of victimizing narrative where she's like, oh, my writing's better than Athena's. Athena was never that great, and she's only getting published because she's wealthy and she's Asian, and like that's what the publishers are looking for, which is not the case.
It's not. I mean, there was a quote that I pulled out, and it's very simple, but so kind of strong and effective. And it was, and without us, these stories wouldn't get told, which is June's justification for why it's okay. It's like, wait a sec, you're saying that it's okay that you stole this story from your dead friend because now it gets told, whereas it wouldn't have been. I mean, it's completely rubbish because Athena is the better writer in terms of her sales are better, she's getting more book deals, she's getting TV deals all the time. So from a publishing point of view, she is a hot ticket, you know, she is a bestseller, a brand author, an event publication, whatever it may be. So the story would have been told, but it's kind of June's backward thinking about it. But it is also, unfortunately, I think that's speaking for a generation of writers who genuinely think their stories aren't getting told because of their ethnicities, their gender, their sexualities. And it is a terrifying, this is a moment of horror for me in the book, but it's very, very powerful line, that just one simple, without us, this story wouldn't get told.
Out of context, you might think, what a lovely line, like that's really empowering. But in the context and who is saying it, you're like, oh, never mind. It's also interesting because June steals Athena's manuscript but makes adjustments to it, and some of the adjustments are quote unquote softening the text. Like she says that they take out racial slurs, that they change some of the Chinese characters to be white to make them more sympathetic, etc., etc. And so it's like she might think that she's improving the quality of the writing, but she's actually just completely whitewashing it. And we see her logic of saying like, oh, those Chinese characters weren't likable, so I put a white farmer instead, and he was more sympathetic. And it's like, maybe he's more sympathetic to you because you are a white person, but you're completely overlooking the purpose of these characters in the first place. What's interesting is that on the cover of Yellowface, the author is credited as Rebecca F. Kuang, but on Babel, it's Or F. Kuang. Why is that?
It's common when authors are published in multiple genres to kind of use their own name but in variations of it. Other times they'll go in using the name they've always used, and then their publisher, be it their editor, the marketer, the sales team, will just kind of say, how do you feel about maybe not doing that?
Of the marketing campaign, I hear that this was quite a fanfare, quite a huge event in terms of publishing.
This was, if you want to understand how to do book marketing in this day and age, you need to look at the Yellowface marketing campaign. It's a multi-award winning campaign which turned a book from an author that was well known and did have the kind of status and the brand into something different, unique, and to an extent even bigger than she was previously. So the initial marketing strategy did kind of tap into the readers and the publishers and getting everybody they knew were going to love it on side. But then you'll notice once the book published, they kind of pivoted to looking at students and going to freshers' fairs and attending universities and getting the author to go and do talks at places like the British Library, as well as some of the biggest festivals there are in Britain, as well as in the US, where she was doing additional publicity with her US publishers. So it was a real feat, but then, like I said, it carried on as well. They did special editions, they did sprayed edges, they did a gold edition at Christmas. They did so much to make it visible, and they did it in a way that was both kind of big and flashy, and then also what we'd class as guerrilla marketing, which is slightly less spenny in terms of kind of budget, but really effective and talkative activities, be it kind of spray painting the Yellowface symbols, which are the kind of eyes on the cover, 'cause it's a very bare cover. There's literally just a pair of eyes on a yellow cover. It's striking because it's so stripped back, which is also quite unusual in fiction at the moment in particular. So yeah, it was a real feat, and they won the British Book Award for Marketing Strategy of the Year, and they were up against a really good strategies like the Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow campaign, which was amazing and also still ongoing. It's probably a book we'll talk about one day.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because this was a standalone as well. This isn't a part of a series. There's nowhere for this to go. We're not seeing a Juniper Song sequel. And I don't really think I would like to see a Juniper Song sequel. I like the book, but I don't really know if I need a follow-up, even with that ending, which was quite ambiguous and very open. But we'll see.
I also think after Yellowface, we started seeing yellow book covers pop up all over the place. Like Butter is another one that I can think of. I feel like it was like the kind of brat summer of publishing. It did what Charlie X did for that shade of green in publishing with this shade of yellow.
Yeah, definitely. I think green and yellow are the most popular publishing colours when it comes to covers. If you go into any kind of Waterstones and look at the tables, or if you go into your local supermarket and look at the shelves, you will see a ton of blue and yellow books, no matter what time of year, every type of publisher. But yeah, green, you won't see many green books. So sorry, Charlie XCX, you haven't reached the publishing world yet.
Rebranding herself from June Hayward to Juniper Song, she is engaging in this practice, which is the title of the novel, called Yellowface. People might have heard of the term blackface, which is kind of a historical term. It goes back to like minstrel shows and has happened in cinema and theater, etc., of white people kind of painting themselves darker, often adhering to black stereotypes in order to most of the time make fun of black people. And Yellowface also has its origins in Hollywood. So Yellowface is a practice that goes back to old Hollywood, where white actors would dress up as typically East Asian characters, adopting racist stereotypes, and it's often a character that's used for comic relief. We saw Dr. Fu Manchu, who was a supervillain in classic Hollywood. In Breakfast at Tiffany's, Mickey Rooney's character, the landlord, Mr. Yuniyoshi, a yellowface caricature. But it can also appear in more subtler forms, like what Orf Kuang was talking about in the novel, but also in 2017 there was an adaptation of an anime called Ghost in the Shell. It was a Japanese manga, which completely whitewashed the story and erased the original, the context, the racial element. So it can manifest in anything from these extreme racial caricature stereotypes to these kind of subtler, more insidious forms of whitewashing.
It was interesting because when the book was announced and we all saw the title and we all saw Yellowface, honestly there was a bit of kind of a gasp in the room. It was a bit like, can we say that? Can books be called that? But it was powerful and an impactful moment. But the title does kind of reflect not necessarily what happens in the story, but the themes of the story and the cultural misappropriation, the characters' ethnicities, and this old Hollywood term, like you say, blackface, yellowface, and how it all kind of links back to creative industries. And publishing is very much a creative industry of storytelling. So it's horrifying to think Yellowface is still happening, but in a different way. In addition to also being on film and screen, still, it's also happening in stories on paper.
We can tell from the cover, from the name, that one of the primary themes of this novel is race and cultural appropriation, and kind of that like question of who can tell what story. I think because the novel is told from June's point of view, it's a first-person perspective, and it's a satire. She's an unreliable narrator. We get a lot of kind of racism from her perspective. You know, she goes to a Chinese restaurant and she's like, the food smells, it's bad, I don't get the point of this. And then she'll have kind of these microaggressions in her mind, and out loud to like Asian characters around her and stuff. I understand what R.F. Kuang was doing of kind of, you know, highlighting racism to maybe primarily white audiences. I think it ended up being a bit too over the top, a bit too on the nose for me. I think I understood it from the first few instances, and I think she really kind of like beats us over the head with the kind of cartoonish, outrageous levels of racism that we're seeing. It kind of reminds me of the Barbie film and the division that the monologue that America Ferrera gave, where she was talking about kind of women and like women's position in society, you know, the burden of women, etc. And some people really resonated with it, but I think for me it felt very like kind of Tumblr feminism, very kind of entry level, and that's kind of what the racism in this novel gives for me. It's kind of like, I understand it and it might be helpful for some people, but for me it was a bit over the top. And I also could imagine that if you are Asian or if you are a person of color reading this, it's probably not very nice to just keep reading these instances of racism, because I mean they already know, like, yeah, white people are stupid, white people are racist sometimes. So I don't think it really needs to go as cartoonish as it did.
Yeah, it felt OTT at certain points, even for me, but it was an interesting look at it, and I'm kind of, like I said, there was a lot of learnings to be made, and it is an important read, but there were certainly moments where it just felt like the story was forgotten, and instead the characters were just an example of exactly what not to do, and it became more of a rant and event about people that are racist, microaggressions, the publishing industry, and it just kind of lost the plot literally lost the plot.
We have talked about the kind of over-the-top elements of Yellowface, but white authors pretending to be Asian does really happen. And I came across this kind of crazy, also very funny story from a New Yorker article written by Hua Xu, which is called When White Poets Pretend to be Asian. And it says, in 1991, literary magazines around the United States began receiving mysterious packages containing the poems of Araki Yasusada, a deceased and entirely unknown Japanese poet with a spectacular backstory. He was a Hiroshima survivor, and his poems were accompanied by diaries, scraps of paper with translations, and sketches, and these prominent journals flocked to publish and praise Yasusada's work. And then turns out that there was no Yasusada, and that when they applied pressure to the poet's biography, it completely crumbled. His entire life was a fiction, supposedly crafted by an equally obscure Japanese translator named Tosa Motokyu. But there was no Motokyu either. The Yasusada poems eventually pointed back to Kent Johnson, a middle-aged white poet who was then teaching in Illinois. So it does happen. That was 1991, but still happens.
Still, I mean, wow, what just Kent Johnson as well. That's
Kent
just such
Johnson.
It just comes across as a very
it's
white
the whitest name. Yeah, it's the whitest name. He's teaching in Illinois. I'm like, that's the whitest bread man you could come up with.
Why would you do? And why would you go like create two identities just to? Wow,
He was really, but also like, if you have that imagination, just write a good novel.
Well, that's kind of it. And it's exactly the same with June's song. It's like, if you have the talent, write a good novel. It's kind of, it's not easy. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy to write a good novel, but it's not impossible, as we know. Anyone can do it if you put your mind to it, June.
Yeah. And I'm like, surely if you were writing these poems and then you had diary fragments and sketches, like, we could have put that imagination to better use. But again, I think it's illustrating that notion of like, oh, it's harder than ever to be a white author or a male author or a white male author nowadays, which is actually not the case, because I was looking for author statistics and we found some from 2023, and which are a little bit outdated, but they were kind of the most up-to-date that we could find. And it found that in 2023, the published authors were 75% white, almost 6% black, an increase of 0.87 since 2010. So that's in 13 years, it's increased 0.87%. And then for Asian authors, it was 4.93%, which was a decrease of 0.72 since 2010, and it was the only analyzed minority to decrease. So across all authors, it was still 75% white.
We have a lot of work to do in the publishing industry. We really do. And the thing is, we all know it as well. And it's a case of no one can quite pinpoint precisely what's stopping kind of diversity within literature. It's really kind of, everyone will give you a different answer if you were to ask them.
Well,
and
now
so,
in America, we see Trump dissolving the DEI, the diversity, equality, and inclusion frameworks around the country, and actually like punishing people who do engage with it. So it goes, it's such an important conversation that goes, it's very important in publishing and in media and film and everything, but it goes so much wider. And I think this year in particular, with Trump's attack on everybody's human rights, it really emphasizes that these conversations need to be had.
It's because it is an entertaining, compulsively readable book with a very important topic, which people can't find many books about currently. So it's an interesting one. And there is a TV adaptation coming out soon. Lionsgate bought the rights. Wow. In 2024 around the paperback. So we should see something maybe in a couple of years' time. We'll see. I would certainly watch it. I think this could translate really, really well to TV and film. But
I agree.
I love the fact in the book, June Hayward even says, Florence Pugh will play me. That girl from Crazy Rich Asians will play Athena. And it's just like, wow, you've already fan casted your own book.
Also, the fact that she was like Florence Pugh and then she didn't have any respect. She's like that one girl from Crazy Rich Asians. She didn't even care to learn her name.
No, exactly. Perfect example of a microaggression in this book and how impactful this can be. So a really good read. I'm glad I read it. The reread let me down. I think because you know the plot twist, you know the kind of idiosyncrasies of it and the educational aspects of it, it's not as entertaining the second time round. It's just hard-hitting and uncomfortable. So.
I think you led us to a very good segue here. Give us a little hint. With this novel, are you going to shelf it, share it, or shred it?
Oh, I'm going to shelf it. I think it's important and I want to keep my copy. But what about you?
I agree. Also, for anyone who's watching it with the video, you can see, but I have written all over it. You can, you can barely see, but I've scribbled all over this novel. I have written in the margins. I have underlined everything, so I don't think it will be accepted anywhere.
That's so painful.
I'm so sorry. I think it's interesting. I'm also intrigued to read R.F. Kuang's next book, which is coming out this year, I believe.
Couple of weeks time.
Yeah. If you have read Yellowface or any of R.F. Kuang's books, if you're a fan, please let us know. What do you think about Yellowface's engagement with social satire? Did you find it effective? If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate us 5 stars or leave a review if you are so inclined. It really helps us out. And we will see you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. So I'm also looking forward to reading O.F. Kwang's new book, which is Calabasas. I think it's coming out in August. But Ellie, what about you? Do you have any interest in reading her other books or Babel, for example?
Yeah, I haven't read Babel or the Poppy War trilogy, and to be honest, I'm not really sure if I want to read Babel. I don't know exactly why. I think it's been very hyped. I think there's over 200,000 uses of the hashtag on TikTok, so I've seen
it's
it
very
everywhere.
Popular online. Yeah,
it is. But I've also heard very mixed things, and I'm not sure if it's going to be one for me. But do we think we should read it for the podcast? Do we think readers would enjoy
Interesting.
that?
It is one of the kind of staples of dark academia, so it could be a good one for a podcast episode. I guess we'll have to see.
Yes, readers, let us know. Shall we read Babel in a future episode of What You're Reading?
Also, let us know what you thought of Yellowface if you've read it, if you're a fan of R.F. Kuang. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars and leave a review. It helps a lot. You can follow us on our socials, and we will see you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.